Josh Malerman, thank you for joining me on the podcast here.
Yes. Hello. This is awesome.
I reached out to you and I've reached out to several artists and authors because the winter is upon us. Quarantine has not gone away, and it just made me very concerned that we would fall into a bit of disenchantment. We would fall into a bit of weariness. We would fall into a bit of just finding it hard to go forward. So I wanted to reach out to some of the most creative people we know and sort of pick their brain on how they've been able to sustain creativity and motivation. And so I'm asking you to think back on an 8-month period.
Yeah. Wow.
But, I think we could start with how shutdown started in March and you started releasing chapters of a book, right? Tell us about that.
Well, okay. So I had planned on writing Carpenter's Farm in April.
Okay.
And I made this decision in January or something. Sometimes it works that way where you would know too, where you're like, you decide to do it, but not this second, but you're like, I will do this in April. I'll do this in December, whatever it is. And then, and I had tried Carpenter's Farm once before. I made it actually 40,000 words deep, which, as you know, is a lot. And it was all wrong and boring and blah, blah, blah. So in January, I had an idea of how it should go. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this in April. Then between January and April, everything started to shut down. Alice and I were at the gym regularly, and we saw on TV that the NBA cancels its season and stuff like that. And we were like, whoa, the NBA just canceled their season? Like,
that was the teller for everybody. That's when we all knew.
It bizarrely, it was, right? Because it was this like $1 billion industry was like, no. And we were like, oh boy, okay, I guess this is real. And so I kind of said to myself, hey, if you're going to be locked down, you're planning on writing a book anyway, let's just get through these couple months. Because I think a lot of us thought it would be a few months, maybe something like that. But then I started seeing online people struggling with money, people saying, where can I, if the library closes, where do I get free books? Can I still get a curbside from the library? Do you know of any great deals on Kindle, stuff like that? So I was like, hey, if I'm going to write this anyway, and I have no idea when this book would come out because Mallory was slated to come out in July.
Right. We didn't even mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had no idea, like, if I wrote this, it could be years till someone reads it. Why not post it, give it away for free on my website as I do it? And this was partly responsible for the webmaster who called to ask if I had a replacement for the free short story that was up there. And I was like, no, I don't have a replacement. And I don't feel like writing another one. I feel like writing this novel. Let's do this. So we did it. And at the time it felt like, all right, we're getting through this lockdown, this pandemic. And again, I thought it was going to be a couple months, a few months, I mean, most people thought that. And I remember, so it took about a month to do it, to write the book live, Carpenter's Farm. It's still on the website right now for free and will be forever. But, it started at the end of that month, it felt like immediately I had the sensation of, oh, now what? We're still in lockdown. So that was in May or something when I finished? Right. I don't know. And it was like, oh boy, we still got, how many more, a couple more months of this, but now I'm not writing a book. Then time starts to pass and we begin to realize, oh, wait a minute. Nobody's in charge of this. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to go into all that, but we understand nobody's helping here.
Yeah.
And we're not really helping ourselves. So when is this going to end? And fortunately, in a way, I'm the luckiest person in the world in this way, because I write books from home.
Right.
So not that I, me, I'm always out and about and hosting people and stuff.
Exactly.
Which is a big part of my life and my personality.
Sure.
But okay, I could write, I can stay at home, I could rewrite, I could work on stuff. We don't have kids, meaning that we didn't have to worry about the school side of it. So, and that might sound like, what's it called? What's the right word that I'm looking for? That might sound even more maddening in a way. All Allison and I have is each other in this hotel in the winter that we're snowed in, Yeah,
it could have been very quickly could have turned into the lighthouse.
Yes.
You would have been, or maybe she would have been Willem Dafoe. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I'm going to ask her later. I think I would have been, but anyway, but she is actually Northern. So anyway, so time passes and I end up working on I had to write another book we release Mallory in
Kind of a big
July.
deal.
So I had that. So I had writing Carpenter's Farm, release, in other words, artistic projects to look forward to throughout the lockdown. Then at the end of Mallory, then it was like, now what? Uh-oh. And I owed Del Rey the next book. I pitched them this other idea. They said yes. And I wrote that one. And that was a different experience because this was no longer live. We're at the beginning of this lockdown. Now it was almost like you're descending like the rings of hell. And now it's like, now you're writing a book at level 7 or something,
That's got to feel weird, right?
Yeah, dude. It was like, because everyone here obviously was distracted or focused on the election and the pandemic and all this. Like,
Sure.
There are so many things to be freaked out by, distracted by, but for some reason, with me, it's almost like, how when you're like, oh, I don't feel like watching a movie, but once you start it, you can get into it. Or maybe I'm not tired, but when you lay down, you can fall asleep. Or I don't feel like running, but once you start, you're like, oh, I'm so glad I did. And that's what Forever Since Breakfast was like for me. That was like, at first I was like, man, am I really going to write another book? And it doesn't even speak to how prolific I am that I wrote 2 novels in lockdown. It speaks to how long this experience has been.
There is that, yes.
I mean, it's like I typically write a book 6 months later. Well, here we are. So that all that was natural. But at first, yes, there was a sense of like, wow, are you going to be able to do this right now? This is some heavy and your mind is all over the place. But once it started, I was in it. And that's on. I talked to you. Obviously, you and I were both writing. I'm like in it and regularly going like day by day. I mean, you experienced the same thing with writing. And how did it help you in that way?
Well, I was going to ask you this because I tried to write a novel, and what I found challenging was, and maybe you could talk to this as a creative person. You, let's say you worked on a given day, you worked on the book for 2 to 3 hours.
Yep.
But you were awake for 12 other hours of that day. And so you are awake, conscious Josh experiencing the world, but then you have to get into creative mode. That's what I would find challenging. How about you?
Yes, 100%. It's funny, right? Everyone always says like, oh, how does someone write a novel in a month, or how do they write one at all? But very rarely do they ask, what do you do with the other 14 hours a day, the other 15 hours in the day? And you're totally right, dude. It was like a constant battle of, oh, hey, I'm writing this book that I started is good. And this is something to be really excited about. Battled with like everything that's going on outside. And I have kind of my own discipline or theory or something on with writing a book where I try, and we talked about this, I try not to do like too much in one day, because that can make the next day you take off. And then once you take one day off, and maybe I'll take 2 days off. And then once you have 2 days off, now it's hard to get back into it. Right. So even if I feel like writing more in the day, I typically will stop at like 2,000 or 3,000 and be like, okay, that's it for today. Yeah. To ensure that it's done every day. So like you said, 3 hours, not only is it 3 hours, but it was 3 hours of somewhere happier than when you're not there. So it was especially tempting to go back in and let's just pound out some more.
Yeah.
But I'm very aware that a marathon session, as romantic as that sounds, can actually end up derailing the writing of a novel.
You know what it sounds like? This sounds like we're entering maybe the metaphor of meditation, because whatever someone's escape might be, it could be baking or quilting or painting. And part of your message seems to be, you have to bake or quilt or paint. Do that for 2 hours a day. But accept and acknowledge that the first half an hour will be challenging because you're getting into your meditation.
Yes, you could not have said it better than you just did. It's the same exact thing with any like physical exercise workout, mental exercise workout. It's the same for me. It's like verbatim the same thing, where to the point where almost every writing session is some sort of trance state, where there will come a moment where it's like you're not even concerned with the actual language itself. You're almost reading as you're writing, and we've heard that sort of phrase before, but don't take that one lightly, listeners, viewers. because it really sincerely feels that way. If you don't know, and typically with a book, maybe you have some landmark. I mean, some people outline, but for me, I have some landmark moments in mind. And so I want to get from here to there. And I don't know what that means, but that's the plan. So without knowing any of those in between beats, to see them as they come and to accept them each as they come is a form of meditation. Mm-hmm. And well, at some point you're like, it's almost like seeing your fingers and hearing the sound of it and seeing the words fill in the page in front of you almost becomes its own trance.
Yeah.
For a couple hours a day.
And I think it's worth saying, and I'll say for myself, because I worked on writing while I was in quarantine, but the severe language we could jump to is I'll say it kept me sane. And I would then go on to say to anybody, oh, I'm working on this, but I honestly don't care if anyone reads it.
Right.
It is helping me.
Right.
I think everyone should remember that, whatever you want to work on.
Dude, 100%. I have felt that way. Okay, that was a brilliant return segue to Carpenter's Farm, because so I wrote it online and I have all the books of mine that are published, I have on my shelf. But I don't have Carpenter's Farm because it's literally only on the website, and that's where I plan it to stay for now, at least, right? And a friend of mine told me that he could get me like an advanced reading copy of Carpenter's Farm. He can make one for me.
That's cool.
And I know. And I was like, what do you mean? And he explained it to me and he showed me and everything. And I was like, yeah. 4 days later, I have it. Here's the advance. This says not for sale across the title. But I kind of like that. It makes it some weird thing.
It existed ethereally and now it's tangible.
Yeah. So what I said to Philip when I got this was that, like, yes, what's the right phrase? Yes, when Bird Box is published and you see it on the shelves and Bird Box, the movie, oh my God, and The House of the Head, the Creepshow episode, these things are unbelievable experiences, but literally nothing tops like this. Mm-hmm. When the book you wrote and you're holding it for the first time and you're looking at it and you're like, oh my God, yeah, no, these are all words in a row. And it's, it's like, especially if it was written in, again, like a sort of trance or meditative state, right. To see it actually there is almost like evidence that was all real, what you experienced.
Yeah. And now that you have this artifact of a thing that you created in what, we consider to be dark and challenging times, and to go back to the baker or the quilter or the painter, or maybe you are an actual carpenter, you will have something you worked on. Could be a table, could be something you.
No, it's interesting that you're saying it, because Allison for the past couple of weeks has been like reupholstering things and like things that I would have thought we were going to throw out, like this chair, this weird bench thing, that are now like these gorgeous items in our house. She has actually turned to that stuff, and she's listening to audiobooks while she does it. And for her, it seems to be meditative also. Mm-hmm. She's not too she's obviously aware and of everything going on in the world, but she's a natural optimist. So it doesn't, and I bring that up for this reason. I guess I don't look at writing or the trance state we're talking about, or meditation, or these things, as an escape.
I was just about to say that word.
And it's more like, I don't know how to explain it, because it's not, I don't want to hear about this. Mm-hmm. It's like, I already heard about this. I already know about this.
Right.
Now I also want to know and hear about this or experience this.
Well,
so there's some sense of balance there.
Absolutely. You're someone who feels the world, who responds to the world. You're compassionate. Yeah. And maybe this is, and for anyone who wants to be creating something during these times, you're taking in all this information every day, social media, news, what have you, and you are absorbing it. And so most of it's probably going to be pretty troubling. So then you channel that into something brighter. You're not escaping, you're channeling.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. 100% agree. And even if that's just for the duration of the session, but seeing that you did that, think about the momentum that creates for yourself. Why? Because then this all doesn't seem as bleak and hopeless. Like you don't feel helpless during it. You feel like, no, I can get stuff done. I can create. I can do things of worth, rather than just staring at a headline and being like, oh no.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there is There is positive escapism that we'll wrap up with. There must be positive escapism in just reading a good book. You write books, but you must be reading books too, right?
Okay, well, that happened for me in a big way at the beginning. Okay, two landmark moments in this lockdown for me. The first was Terry Brooks, because at the beginning of this stuff,
The sci-fi guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
the fantasy sci-fi, yeah. And I was like, he's probably behind you somewhere, but but I, at the beginning of this lockdown, I was like, man, I've been on a strict horror diet for a long time, and I do not know if I'm in the mood for hardcore horror right now. So I picked up Terry Brooks' fantasy novel, Sword of Shannara, and I was like, it was like soul balm, man, because it was just as imaginative as horror, but it without like any brutality, without any without the darkness. There's scary stuff in there, but not the same, you know. It was incredible. He like got me through, just like Carpenter's Farm did that beginning part. Then in around like July or something, I had to do a talk with Chuck Wendig, the author.
Yeah. Also, I think he's into the Star Wars expanded universe.
Yep.
He's also a sci-fi guy.
Yeah. Yes. And he wrote a pandemic end times, like 1,000-pager called Wanderers, that we were supposed to discuss Wanderers. Well, guess what? That means I had to read it. So here I was in Terry Brooks and all that, and like, God, this feels so good. And again, it's like you said, it's like positive escapism or that kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, I got to read Wanderers. It's going to be insane reading about a pandemic and end times during a pandemic.
Was it like a jacuzzi into a lake?
Yeah, yes, dude. But then something struck me like a third of the way through. I was like, wait, this is bizarrely assuring and soothing, because I had this sense like a lot of what Chuck wrote is going on. And people say that as well about Mallory and about other end times novels. And it struck me that like this feeling of like, okay, wait a minute. If Chuck was able to predict this, if we are able to imagine this, then we are probably also able to solve this. And there was a sense of like what's happening in the world is not so insane that Chuck Wendig, like a year before, wrote almost like the same scenario, like literally almost the same scenario, down to the factions, the mask list, like, you know, we're taking it seriously, not blah, blah, blah. Mallory, same thing. Other ones, the same thing. So in a roundabout way, Wanderers was almost more facing it head on and realizing like, okay, we can solve this. This is not a surprise to us what's happening right now. It just sucks. Yeah. We can solve this.
Yeah. Well, Josh, those are two great book recommendations and a lot of great advice. And it's good to see you. We have gotten used to this virtual connection. That's been important as well. But good advice just to get through that first, maybe difficult half hour of your creative session, but then stay with it, right?
That really is it. Yep. I'm really glad that we talked about that, because I need to take my own advice and remember that for what I write next.
Josh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks.